And now, a continuation of Quantum Gate by Jane E. Hawkins, as read by the Plurality Report for a one-take toilet top audiobook production. Chapter 23. Hawkins was still with Wayland. Griffin went in search of Michaels and finally found him in the simulation room, deep into it, his body moving smoothly and hard through whatever reality was going on under his top hat. Griffin paused to watch him for a moment. Say what you would about the man, when it came to fighting, he was absolutely brilliant. Griffin envied his ability to turn everything off except for the moment, the present, the now. It was, Michaels had explained sarcastically, a freaking gift. Then Griffin heard the Sarge and Andrews talking at the far end of the room and slipped out before they saw him. He'd put in his 2 hours later, he thought. Coming out of the room, he remembered the conversation between Dr. Marks and the Colonel he'd overheard the day before, and thought about his own conversation with her over breakfast this morning. Alonzo was right. She was beautiful. And Charlie Becker was right. She was intelligent. And his own gut instinct was right. She was in trouble. Drag 12 billion people through the gate? Where could they possibly put 12 billion people on planet AJ3905 with its fatal atmosphere and its deadly bugs? Griffin took a deep breath. Maybe Dr. Marks was in enough trouble that she would be willing to make a deal. Maybe they could help each other. At the very least, maybe she could tell him what was going on. He went down the corridor until he came to the civilian lab where Dr. Marks worked. After a moment of hesitation, he stepped forward. Somewhat to his surprise, the door opened without a security lock, and he went in. A short hallway led into a broad open room, where a wall full of displays that he couldn't read. Were they decorations or data? Difficult to tell when you had no idea what was going on. Dr. X.I. Lee, Dr. Marks' assistant, looked at a moving display and made notes on a folio computer. Her smooth hair glistened in the changing light. The data appeared to be about plants. "Hello," she said. "Put them on the desk there. Thank you." Griffin smiled, looking at her crisp profile against the lighted displays. "I beg your pardon." "Put them on the desk." She did not look away from her notes, and her crisp voice was impatient. "I'm sorry, I don't know what you're talking about." "What?" She looked at him. "Oh, I'm sorry, I thought you were... I'm sorry, may I help you?" Maybe. Is Dr. Marks here?" She just looked at him. I talked to her earlier, and she seemed a little... Griffin waved his hand, unwilling to put a name on how Dr. Marks had seemed. "I just thought I'd see if she was okay." "Is she? Okay, I mean." "Dr. Marks is not here," the woman said curtly. "You are not allowed to be in here. This is a restricted area." Her face became stern. "You need to go." "Look, you don't have to get uptight about it. I just wanted to know." "Please leave now," Dr. Lee said, rising. "I do not want to have to report you. The UN is very strict about security areas." Griffin felt his temper start to fray. "Then why wasn't your door secure?" he demanded. "I was expecting a delivery," she said. "I am still expecting a delivery. Please leave now." She looked at him flatly, her arms loose at her side. For a moment, she reminded him of Cranshaw. Griffin left, muttering. He wasn't upset at being tossed out of the laboratory as much as he was at the woman's attitude. Dr. Marks was in trouble. She was having a hard time, and her assistant didn't seem worried at all. Chapter 24. Outside the civilian lab, Griffin tapped at a milliterm and checked the time, then sighed. He was scheduled for sim training, and as much as he didn't want to, he'd better get his 2 hours in. Hawkins was there, talking quietly but urgently to Sarge. Griffin nodded and passed by closely enough to hear what they were talking about. That they were talking about Wayland, and that Sarge knew that the woman was taking compassionate leave for the day. Griffin sat, put on the top hat, and gritted his teeth through the uncomfortable moments of transition until the shunts were firmly in place. An information display scrolled in front of him. Stuff about rules and regs and not loitering in the mess hall. All the garbage that some officer was probably paid lots of money to write, and which nobody reads unless they absolutely had to. Griffin had read it all before and, as it scrolled by, noted that nothing had changed. Then he heard Michaels speak as though right next to him. "Come on out of the database. It's time to rock and roll, baby boy." The information display vanished, to be replaced by that poisonous-looking sky. Griffin felt his heart rate accelerate almost instantly. The simulation was even more intense than yesterday. He'd never gone so deep into a VR in his life. He completely lost awareness that he was inside an artificial universe. When 3 bugs attacked him at once and killed him, he woke up inside the Top Hat's readouts, deeply shocked and disoriented. Strange stuff. Also very satisfying. As he checked his kill rate, he realized that he had felt positively exultant each time the death scream of a bug sounded. He wanted to kill bugs. The thought of actually going outside and doing it for real made his skin tingle. Sarge did a post-mortem on the run, reamed him out heavy for letting his skiver be boxed in, and then he was back into it for another run. He hated the bugs. He hated the very ground they crawled on. He loved getting over them and raining fire down on their wriggling bodies. The hideous sky twisted over his head as he screamed joy at the deaths below him. After the 5th run, Sarge said, "Time for a break." For a moment, he was outright angry with her. He wanted to go back into Sim to spend the rest of the day doing this simple and lovely job of erasing bugs from Johnson's archipelago. As he took off the helmet and stood, he reminded himself repeatedly that it had all been some sort of dream, not reality at all. Reality would be different. If he got jumped by a bug out there, he wouldn't wake up inside a quiet suit sitting on a soft chair. He'd be dead. Pure and simple, dead. He left the room and found himself standing in the corridor, still dazed. Hawkins put a hand on his shoulder, looked him in the eyes, and then passed on by. Castle, Alonzo, Michaels, and Hynek left in a clump, arguing fiercely about the last maneuver and apparently headed upstairs to waste their half-hour break over the poisonous coffee in the mess hall. Hynek must have been observing. He hadn't been a member of the run. Part of him wanted to be killing bugs in Sim, and another part of him was starting to rear up its head in horror at his inability to pull back fully from the VR. He suddenly needed very much to be alone for a moment, and he punched the lift for the 1st floor, went down the corridor to the airlock, and found the atrium door. Griffin sat on the nearest bench, watching that lovely bright light. It was good to feel the warmth, the heavy sweetness of the air, and the slightly damp bench underneath him. Slowly, the feeling of horror drained away. Michaels had to be right. Griffin couldn't be the person who screamed in joy at the death of the aliens. He had never liked inflicting death. He closed his eyes and concentrated, moving away from the emotions and into a quiet place, a place where he could reach serenity. His shoulders started to relax, and the warmth and peace of the atrium helped. Jenny would like this place. His interior peace shattered, and his hands clenched down on themselves, hard. Jenny. That terrible fight. His mother had called him an hour after Jenny's accident. "Drew, there's been an accident." He knew right away it was Jenny. He knew it was his fault. The collision control system on that car had been flaky for months, and he'd never said anything about it. An accident. A bad one. Or his mother would have told him first that Jenny was okay. Jenny was not okay. Jenny would never be okay again. His mother's concerned face looked into his from the projection screen, and her voice droned on. He didn't hear the words, but absorbed the terrible content. When Jenny got really angry, she would go roaring down old-fashioned back roads. Very few people frequented those roads, and fewer still had malfunctioning collision detectors. If the other cars had worked, it wouldn't have happened. A head-on with both cars going over 50 miles an hour. Plastic, steel, and webs could only do so much. The driver of the other car had died instantly. If the next person on the scene had not been a nurse, Jenny would have died too. His mother didn't know what Jenny's injuries were, just that she had been badly burned but was still alive. Mom told him where the hospital was and signed off, obviously expecting him to meet her there. Instead, Griffin had sat in front of the whited-out screen for nearly an hour, his mind a riot of images. He had failed. He always failed. He put on a good show at first, didn't he? Everyone would be so impressed with him in the beginning, and then he would start messing it all up. He'd been messing up medical school the day Jenny picked him up in that entertainment mall. For her, he had pulled it together and gotten his undergraduate work done only a year late. He'd been happy, and she'd been proud of him. But that had changed this past year, hadn't it? He started messing up again. Not because it was hard, not because he didn't want to please her. He didn't know why. He just had. Now he had messed up again, big time, and Jenny's lovely body was mangled. Without knowing precisely what he was going to do, he packed a suitcase, put on his nose filters and goggles, and walked out of the apartment they had shared. He took nothing that he couldn't carry. He walked, and walked, and walked. Then he walked into a bright and jazzy bar and got himself blitzed. He wasn't sure why he had joined Beatrice 3 days later. Still, where else did a coward belong? Someone who couldn't face his responsibilities, who ran out on his beloved in her time of need? The military was perfect for him. Do what you're told. No responsibility, no worries, no failure. A lift began its wind down from second to first, and he snapped out of his painful reverie. Alonzo and Hynek made obscene gestures at the Venus de Milo statue behind him. He rolled his eyes and went back to the sim bay. Chapter 25. They did ground maneuvers for another hour. Deathly boring except for the occasional bug kills. He liked skivers better, even in simulation. Walking around, waiting for something to jump out at you wasn't his idea of fun. Sarge called a lunch break. I don't know what's gotten into you guys. Never seen grunts so eager to do training. She shook her head, looking both puzzled and pleased. Had to pry Castle away last night. She was doing a long sim run and it was time for lights out. Keep it up and you might actually get passable at this. Lunch was spaghetti. It smelled almost right, but the pasta was overcooked and the sauce was thin. He didn't feel like talking, so he took the plate to his room. No new mail. Good. Each time the message light lit, he feared more deeply that it would be Jenny. He hadn't seen her since the fight, since before she took off and had the accident. There were some photos in the medical records he'd hacked into, but he hadn't called them up. The hologram MRI was more than he could stand as it was. He set the plate on his desk, and for the first time since joining Beatrice, he composed a short message to his mother. He kept having to back up and start over again. The knowledge that it would be viewed by other people and maybe censored before she ever saw it made him self-conscious and angry. He kept thinking of more and more things he would like to tell her. Things about fusion scrubbing and planet AJ3905, and the anguish on Dr. Marx's face, and the light in the atrium that was so right that it was wrong. He knew he couldn't say any of it, but the one thing that wouldn't be censored was the thing he still couldn't bring himself to say. That he was tired of running away. That he was tired of turning his back on the problems in his life. That he was sorry. So he sent her a short, unconvincing note, full of platitudes and skimpy on details, and knew this stupid note with its stupid face and his stupid grin would become one of her treasures, because it was the first time he'd sent anything. He only hoped for her sake that he didn't look as ashamed as he felt. After returning his plate to the mess hall, Griffin reported back to the briefing room. The second set of simulation runs was even more intense than the first, And once again he went so deeply into Sim that he didn't wonder at his joy in the work. He just perfected his skills at finding bugs and sneaking up on them. Sarge pulled him and Michaels out early. "Time for KP, boys." She smiled at Michaels. He looked back at her without expression. "Oh, Michaels, grow up. You've been in the Army a long time. You mouth off, you get KP." Michaels' mouth twitched in a small smile and he nodded. "Okay, boss lady, but don't expect me to stop complaining about those suits." "I'd be a fool to expect you to stop complaining about anything. Just keep it down in the public places. Ask me for a meeting. You know I'll listen, don't you?" Michaels just looked at her. Griffin suddenly remembered that his conversation with Private Lopez the night before. Michaels and the Sarge? They neither said nor did anything that might lead to that impression. But Griffin couldn't shake the feeling that Lopez was right. "Yes, ma'am," Michaels finally said. "Okay, get that place clean, and while you're at it, teach Cookie how to make things taste a little better." "I'll do my best," said Michaels. They headed up in the lift. Cookie glared at Michaels when they came in and wordlessly led them to a set of troughs in the back of the cafeteria. Michaels must have been charming the locals again. The sad-faced man pointed and said, "Make 'em shine," and left them looking at the thick black slime lining an array of semicircular metal containers. Griffin didn't know what they were used for, but it couldn't be good. Michaels pulled an odd-looking gadget off a rack behind them and opened it, revealing a set of paddles that had nearly the same diameter as the troughs. Trust Michaels to have run into this job before. Griffin watched him for a minute, then pulled another tool off the wall and took it to the farthest trough. Michaels still looked abstracted. With any luck at all, they would be done before he was ready to talk, and Griffin wouldn't have to hear what he had to say. They worked in smelly silence for nearly an hour before Michaels finally spoke. "Griffin was thinking about my last simulation run when he noticed that the burly man had stopped working and was looking at him." "What, have I developed a second head?" he said. "I saw Whalen at breakfast today. She looked pretty bad." Griffin nodded. "Yeah, Kansas City bought it. You wouldn't think there was enough oxygen left for that kind of fire to keep going. Won't be much longer. Those UN jerk-offs have stopped messing with the Gulf, so the big oxy surge is backing off. You'd think the ozone blast in '52 would have convinced them to quit messing with the atmosphere, but no. They've got to do it again, and now we're supposedly helping them with another one of their idiot experiments." The words were typical Michaels, but the tone wasn't. He didn't sound like he was paying much attention to what he was saying. "Okay, what is it?" Michaels actually focused on him. "It? Man, what are you talking about? Whatever it is, you've got a lump of gray shit you call a brain." "I don't know, man. I don't think this is the place to talk about it." "Damn it, Michaels, cut it out!" Griffin slapped his paddles against the trough. "If you've got something to say, say it. I'm tired of all this yes and no cloak and dagger shit. What the hell is wrong?" He expected Michaels to blow his top, yell, and that would be the end of it. Instead, Michaels just looked at him. "The UN is lying to us," he said finally. "Again? We're not on AJ 3905 or whatever the hell they say this is. There is no Johnson's Archipelago. At least not here. And there are no bugs. I don't know what we're shooting at, but it's not whatever the UN says it is." "Oh, shit," Griffin said, not wanting to hear it. "I just thought you were thinking about boinking the Sarge." Michaels stared at him for a moment, then shook his head. "You are a piece of work," he said. "Is that all you can think about? I tell you, they're lying, and it's not just for practice." Griffin stared back at him. The cold feeling in his stomach was so bad he wanted to double over or throw up or run. Instead, he clutched the paddles. "God damn it, Michaels. I think you finally bought it," he said furiously. "You know what? I don't want to know. They're planning to blow your ass up and you don't care? And you don't know. Just shut up, Michaels. You don't know shit. Michaels shook his head, and suddenly the tension broke. And even if I did know shit, you wouldn't want to hear about it, he said amiably and flicked open his paddles. Griffey, I just hope you have a chance to grow up before you die. Griffin looked at him for a few seconds, filled with frustration, curiosity, and a deep wish that all the mysteries would stop. To hell with Michaels. To hell with paranoid theories. To hell with all of it. Besides, Michaels wouldn't take the argument personally. He never did. It was, perhaps, the most frustrating thing about him. They worked for another half hour in silence, and then one of the APs appeared. Survey Team Gamma report to the egress chamber. Alonzo, Alvarez, Michaels, and Tish report to the egress chamber, please. Michaels straightened from his work and smiled at the patch of wall where the figure had been. You'd do anything to get out of KP, wouldn't you? Said Griffin. Michaels put the cleaner back onto its hook, stretched, and grinned. You bet your pretty blues. See you later, man. Break a leg, Griffin said to his retreating back as he swaggered out of the room. Chapter 26. Cookie shooed him out a half hour later and got huffy when Griffin asked what was for dinner. It'll be good this time. You just wait and see. Takes real talent to make specialized diets work right. This place messes up what you boys need to eat, and that's why things haven't been tasting right. But I'll show you what I can do. You just wait and see. Griffin walked out while the man was still muttering, and could hear him railing right up until the door closed. Guy didn't really need an audience. He was just as happy performing for himself. Griffin stood in the corridor, wondering what to do next. He had nothing scheduled until dinner, and he really doubted that it would be better than any other meal he had here. Maybe another simulation run? If Gamma Team was out on survey, there might be slots available in the bay. The idea of going under the helmet again was appealing. It was so simple, so certain. All he thought about was finding and killing bugs. No confusions about astonishingly powerful AIs or high-level UN sci-techs acting weird. The thought of Sim was so attractive, it made him feel a little frightened. Sarge thought it was strange how hot for training they all were. So did he. Instead, he stopped by the enlisted lounge, hoping for something to help distract him. The room was beautiful, maybe even more so than the atrium. Great holographic skyscapes of changing forms covered the ceilings and walls, in floating, spinning balls much like planets drifting through the air. If you wanted, you could play with the balls, either by just batting them around or by getting up a game of skyball. Charlie Becker, the quantum gate tech, sat alone at a table scribbling madly into a bound book. Charlie Becker had said he didn't know how the gate could possibly work. Griffin hesitated, then went over. Hey, may I sit with you? He said. The tech blinked at him, as if he'd never seen Griffin before, and clutched the journal to his chest. No, he said. No, this is important, you know. This is my soul. This is where I reveal the most intimate secrets of my innermost... He stopped abruptly and blinked at Griffin through his impossibly thick lenses. It's the only place, he said. You'd think she'd understand that, but she doesn't. All she cares about is rank, and all that big-time brass kind of stuff, and she doesn't even see me. Oh, but she will, yes indeed. She certainly will. 'Cause I've got plans, big plans for her, you know. He blinked at Griffin again, then slammed the book closed and leapt to his feet. You can't chase me out of here, he yelled as he rushed through the door and down the hall. Griffin gaped after him, and in the far corner, John De Silva looked up from the insides of an old clock shaped like a cartoon mouse. Man's insane, he said, and puffed at a huge cigar. Griffin thought about Dr. Marks and her cigarettes, and was about to ask De Silva about it when the mechanic put his screwdriver inside the clock and twisted. The hands of a clock, each tipped with a white glove, flew across the room. Griffin turned and left, but before he could reach enlisted quarters, an alarm went off. An AP appeared on the wall next to him. Level 1 alert. Level 1 alert. Rescue Team A report immediately to the egress chamber. Andrews, Cranshaw, Griffin, and Hawkins report immediately to the egress chamber. Griffin headed out, his heart hammering. He dove into the lift, and the whine as it went down seemed unusually loud. Were they going to go outside? The hangar had been dead silent when he visited yesterday. Now the air vibrated with the sounds of outriggers being pumped and loaders moving equipment. The door to the skiver irised open as he approached, its plasteel rippling apart in a smooth oval. He could hear Sarge's voice inside. He stopped in front of the door, reluctant to go inside. Now it begins. This had to be a mission. The bilious skies of AJ-3905 flickered in his mind's eye. Oh man, no. I do not want to go out there. He took a deep breath and climbed aboard. Cranshaw, Andrews, and Hawkins were already clustered around the briefing display table in the long blue room of the main hold. Andrews had shed his UN officer's monkey suit for working clothes. A generated map glowed on the table as Cranshaw and Andrews spoke. It was the first area map that Griffin had seen, and he craned his neck, wishing he could see it more clearly. Andrews turned away from his study of the maps. Listen up. A survey team has been attacked in Sector A12. The skiver's down and we have fatalities. Looks like we're dealing with a new type of bug, and these fly. Griffin kept his face still, but his guts clenched. Bugs that could fly? The ones that they'd been fighting in Sim were a major threat to foot patrols and could leap high enough to attack a low-flying skiver. But all the tactics they'd been learning were based on the idea that you could lift up and bomb them into extinction. We're downloading the flight recorder playback simulation now. We're going to need the first aid kit, oxygen, and body bags. Sergeant, who's your best driver? Griffin. She looked at Griffin flatly. You've got the bubble on this one. He nodded. Cranshaw said, I need a wireframe. The onboard systems replied with an elevation map that appeared in the middle of the briefing table. Like most elevations, it was great for contour and piss poor for anything else. Where were they? Damn. They would be on the other side of the island. We'll skirt the fault line, she pointed at a long line near the center of the island, and crank up the sensors when we hit the south perimeter of A12. Griffin blinked. What are they doing way over there? What could there be left to survey anyway? The island just wasn't that big. Overfly it a couple of times and a reconstruction ought to tell you everything you need to know about this poisonous rock. An AP appeared beside the map. Playback ready. The elevation map vanished and the playback came up, inscribed as November 26, 2057, Pac-Trans Extrapolate. The skiver was in the air, surrounded by at least a dozen flying bugs who seemed to be worrying at it. A voice said, Damn it! We're losing Pillow! Sounded like Tish. The skiver had lost Pillow? Gaia! What did the bugs do? How could that happen without an engine blowout or electronic interference? Was that the same mission Michaels had gone out on earlier? The skiver tilted, then headed for the side of a hill. Just before it slammed into the hill, the bugs scattered in all directions. The main body of the skiver remained intact through the crash, but it lost an outrigger against the rocks and dirt. Watching the impact made Griffin's stomach hurt, imagining himself inside and being bounced around. A crash siren was howling in the background, as if anyone in that skiver had needed an alarm to tell them they were crashing. The playback ended. Cranshaw's voice snapped his attention to her. Everybody, full sidearms, lock and load. Griffin, we need you at the helm, please. As he headed toward the front cabin, Andrews held out a hand. Private Griffin, these things brought down a skiver. No shit, Griffin thought angrily. I hadn't noticed. So set your gyro sensitivity to minimum. Griffin blinked at Andrews for a moment. Gyros? What makes you think gyros would help if the electronics are getting hosed? Yes, sir, he said and continued toward the controls. Chapter 27. Hawkins, you're on auxiliary, Cranshaw said. Hey, no problem. Thank God it's Hawkins, thought Griffin as he started the flight sequence. His weapon scores were nearly as high as Michael's. The skipper's light painted in the inside of the hangar in alternating red and white as the outriggers were lowered into position. Griffin watched the connections closely from the camera feed. Maybe the previous skipper hadn't had a solid load. 5 sets of clamps snugged down perfectly, and a quick glow indicated EM glue activation. Nothing wrong there. Outrigger attached, skipper ready to depart, said an AP. A different AP appeared and said, "The PAI has calculated an optimal flight plan. It's logged and approved. You have a 2-kilometer variance zone." Griffin punched for the takeoff macro. The skipper vibrated under him, then rose, pivoted, and moved out through the dense energy curtain of the exit hatch. Griffin's heart rose as the skipper headed up into the strange sky. The craft handled like a dream under his hands, moving quickly and responsibly through the air. Even across such ugly terrain and towards such uncertain risks, flying was a joy. He'd always been good with planes, helis, and skivers. Jenny joked that he was most at home without his feet on the ground. He soared past brown and scrofulous hills, carefully maintaining the course laid in by the onboard while checking for any changes in the land beneath him. His console display was breaking up periodically, producing bursts of static that almost hurt his brain with their intensity. The grays would flash to an odd green and then back to the usual rolling hills. He slapped the console a couple times, but it didn't seem to make any difference. He logged a maintenance request for the mechanic to check it out next cycle. Just past the tall spike of a mountain, the skipper's AP set off an alarm and said, "Alien proximity unacceptable." A flying bug rounded the hill and launched itself at them. The bug was huge, with a wingspan that covered his display and clawed legs waving wildly as it swooped down at him. It was black with hints of green and large yellow eyes. The targeting square came up and he fired. The bug screamed and flashed into white for a heartbeat, but kept coming. It was vaguely humanoid in shape, with 2 long arms outspread from which spiky wings fanned out. It looked almost as if it intended to embrace the skipper. 3 legs dangled loosely beneath its shiny body. Hawkins lined up on it and made the shot. The bug exploded like a plastic toy, jagged pieces flying through the air. Griffin heard a few thumps against the hull of the skipper, and then they were past. He'd seen it happen this way in Sim, but now it struck him as weird. Even Earth insects had a circulatory system of some sort. What kind of living creature simply came apart when shot with a laser rifle? Stranger still, he'd felt a flicker of grief at seeing it blow up. The exultation he'd come to associate with bug kills from the sim runs hit after a heartbeat, but something inside still felt sorry for the bug. The AP said, "I have a lock on Dr. Marks's skipper." "Dr. Marks?" The skipper came into sight beneath them. The wreck didn't look nearly as bad as it had from the pack trans. One of the outriggers lay at a fair distance from the main body, but it otherwise looked like it could just take off. He had expected a burn across the soil and dented equipment. Griffin swung around the site in a quick circle, looking for other bugs nearby, but saw only the rough brown dirt. He set the skipper down carefully. "I show 3 fatalities," said the AP. "An injury and a clean survive. The injury and the survive are in the skipper's EO2 station." Griffin started to get up from his console, but Cranshaw waved him back. "Griffin, stay on the cannons. Let's go, Hawkins. I'll take the living, you take the dead." "Yes, Sergeant," said Hawkins, and they both disappeared into the back of the skipper. After they donned their suits, the airlock cycled them out onto the surface. The VR display showed them as moving circles, Cranshaw in blue and Hawkins in red. The red dot moved toward a much smaller dot labeled Alonzo. Not far away was another that said Tish. The size of the dots showed that both were dead. Tish was dead, so it had been his voice on the PAC-Trans replay. While he waited to hear the airlock cycle out, Griffin remembered the night 5 of them had snuck out past the guards to see an illegal stick game going down 25 kilometers away. It had been Michael's idea, of course. They had gotten in trouble for it, Tish more than the rest of them. He found a friendly lady and being later than the rest of the gang getting back. Cranshaw had talked the CO out of giving him break time and had a chat with Tish later that left the man white. He never did repeat what Sarge had said, but Griffin had the feeling he might have preferred the brig to getting chewed out by Cranshaw. Cranshaw's voice jumped him back into the present. "I've got the 2 live ones. Michaels is fine. Alvarez's suit is breached, but it looks patchable." "A second-tier patch may prove sufficient," said an AP. "Get it. Installing patch." "I'm seeing 2 DOAs," said Hawkins, "but no sign of Dr. Marks." "I'm experiencing some interference with the location of Dr. Marks's body," said the AP, and Griffin looked at the calm female face in astonishment. How could it be unable to find a dead body? What about the transponders? His instruments weren't showing any unusual electromagnetic fields. What else could cause such a problem? "I will continue filtering for location. VR feed will occur if I'm successful. In the meantime, please recover the locatable bodies." "Coming in," said Cranshaw. The rear airlock opened, closed, and cycled. Griffin swiveled his pilot's chair so he could see the entry. As the decontamination units hissed, Andrews unrolled several pallets. He stood by with a combat first aid kit, looking tense and restless. The door opened. Cranshaw and Michaels had already peeled off their CO suits and helmets. They were pulling Alvarez free of his suit while getting him through the door. They kicked it away and half-carried him into the main room. Andrews scrambled forward. "Get him down," he said, gesturing toward the nearest pallet. "Easy, easy," said Cranshaw as she and Michaels lowered the gasping man. "On board," said Andrews. "Get me a stat scan." He knelt on the floor and opened his kit. "Scanning, sir." "Watch his head," said Cranshaw. "I'll get the helmet." The latches had already been undone with the removal of the CO suit, and it slid off easily, revealing Alvarez's face twisted with pain. The airlock door irised briefly again, and Hawkins came in dragging 2 limp-suited figures by their helmet loops. Griffin swallowed hard, watching him lay the dead men gently on the floor. Michael started shouting. Shocked, Griffin turned his head and saw the man haul Andrews to his feet by one arm. "Damn it, you bastards!" He turned and grabbed Andrews. "Did you know about the SD devices?" Michael's face was twisted with rage and fear. Griffin rose from his chair and started toward them, not sure what was going on or what he could do. "Get off me!" shouted Andrews, and shook off his grip. Cranshaw barked. "Michaels, step down!" Michaels pointed at Alonzo. "Look! These men were euthanized!" He grabbed Andrews' arm again. "You killed them!" Chapter 28. Griffin felt his skin chill and his face go white. SD? Self-destruct? They put self-destruct devices in our suits? Andrews jerked his arm free once more. "This man needs medical help now. If you don't want to kill him, you'll back off." He pushed Michaels away and knelt beside Alvarez. Michaels reached for him again. Cranshaw moved in behind him, snaked her right arm under his, and clamped a hand against the back of his neck, forcing his head forward. "Michaels!" she shouted. "Stand down!" "Jesus, all right, let go of me." Michaels was breathing hard, and so was Andrews. An AP appeared and spoke into the brief silence. "Contusions, shock, recommend 100 cc mega-alkaloid." Alvarez's face was contorted, and blood dripped slowly from his lower lip. "Can I get some medicine here, please?" he said in a tight voice. Andrews plucked a spray syringe out of the kit and held it briefly against his jugular. Alvarez sighed and relaxed. Cranshaw still had Michaels in the lock. "I said all right, goddammit, will you let go?" From the look of it, Alvarez probably had at least one broken rib, in addition to the cut on his face. Obviously, he'd bounced hard against something inside the skiver. According to the early flight report, neither Michaels nor Alvarez had gone outside at all. Cranshaw slowly released Michaels, watching him narrowly. He stood and gestured toward the dead men again. "Look, Alonzo and Tish were euthanized. The bugs didn't kill them. The UN did. Why weren't we told?" The UN lieutenant was checking readouts on his handheld. Without looking up, Andrews responded, "The air of this rock is highly toxic. Do you have any idea what that soup out there does to a man? It was standard procedure. If it wasn't for the SDs, those men would still be in agony. Or would you rather have seen that?" Hey, screw you, man. You could have told us. You don't go putting self-destruct devices on enviro suits without telling people. Why don't you go flatline? He stopped yelling, and the only sound in the compartment was his ragged breathing. He began stripping off his gloves. Screw this. I'm not fighting. And when I get back to the base, every swinging dick and Jane on the base is going to know about it. This is going to make Rangoon look like a freaking lady's. Griffin hadn't seen Sarge draw her gun, but now it was pointed at Michael's face. You, Private Michaels, are in breach of contract, and I'm afraid I am going to have to put you on notice. Her voice was very cold, very formal. Jesus Christ, Maria, are you for real? Griffin sucked in air sharply. Sarge walked slowly towards Michaels, keeping the gun on him. Private Michaels, Beatrice International is hereby notifying you that you are in breach of your employment contract. Please do not call me by my first name. Notice is duly received, said Michaels. Griffin wasn't sure if he was taking Crenshaw seriously. By the expression on her face, he certainly should be. She continued to approach him. I am obligated to inform you that your contract is currently being interpreted under the Indentured Forces Act. The gun was now touching the man's chest. As he looked down at it, his face changed and he raised his hands. Griffin felt a wash of relief. Michaels knew she meant it. Failure to cure this breach, she said, and raised her gun to his neck, could result in substantial penalties. She pushed the gun's muzzle into the soft underside of Michael's chin. For a long, still moment, Griffin was afraid she might blow Michael's head off right in front of them. Please, no. Please don't do it. Griffin was afraid to breathe. Michaels blinked. Crenshaw did not. She waited. Finally, Michaels spoke again. His face was still angry, but his voice was almost amused. I take your meaning, Maria. Both of them maintained the same position for several moments more. Griffin knew that Michaels meant it, but he sure wished the guy hadn't insisted on first naming her again. He could almost see her considering whether or not to accept this as acquiescence. She did. She nodded and slowly pointed her gun toward the ceiling instead of at his face. Michael stepped back from her and picked up his gloves. Under her watching eyes, he put them back on and went to help Hawkins tend to the bodies. Nicely done, Sergeant, said Andrews, sounding almost as surprised as he did respectful. Crenshaw grimaced slightly, and Griffin realized that she disliked Andrews. She nodded, then looked at Griffin. Private Griffin, she said, get us home, please. The gun was still in her hand, safety off, and aimed up. He wished she would put it away. Yeah, said Andrews. Can we get the hell out of here, please? Griffin went to his console and set up for a takeoff. The bodies are in the hold, said Hawkins. Griffin activated pillow and pulled back on the stick, grateful to get out of this place. He rose at top speed into the ugly sky, pushing away all the questions and fears with the wrecked survey skipper. They were still out on the surface of AJ 3905, and there were still bugs in the area. He didn't want, for the moment, to think about what Sarge's orders were, or substantial penalties, or any of it. Just fly. The dark landscape moved beneath him, now unbroken by the display malfunctions he'd seen on the way out. He felt a vague gratitude for the simplicity of this trip, then suppressed even that to focus on the feel of the machine and the play of the controls. The squat octagonal base came into view, doors already open to bring the skipper in. Griffin turned control over to the onboard and let it take them through the shield curtain. He watched, feeling dead inside, as they settled into the bay, then ran through the shutdown sequence. A mechanized gurney from a sick bay was waiting in the hangar. Andrews and Michaels gently rolled Alvarez onto it. As they followed it out the door, Griffin caught a glimpse of Michael's face. Total blankness, the eyes distant and the face still. Not good, thought Griffin. What was he planning? Griffin shuddered once and pushed the thought aside as Michaels and Andrews left the hangar. Hawkins was opening the hold doors. Griffin helped him get the still-suited bodies of the dead onto another gurney, this one broad and shrouded. They watched in silence as it rolled away. There would be services later. Griffin felt they ought to say something now, a salutation or a farewell, but his mind was blank. Hawkins sighed, and the moment passed. Sarge unloaded and checked out the remaining gear from the skipper. They went in to help. When the lists were completed and cleared through an AP, Griffin's next plan was to go to his room and bury himself in sleep, if possible. As he was headed out, Sarge called to him. "I think Saunders is expecting you." He nodded automatically, and the door closed behind him. He stood in front of it, feeling both frightened and tired. Jeez, Saunders? He thought longingly of his room and his bunk. He sighed, entered the lift, and pressed 3. The lift rose up through the levels and layers of the atrium. Some of the trees were nearly as tall as the entire atrium, their straight trunks and feathery leaves rising through the air. The lift doors opened, and he was once again in the dense, sterile corridors of the base. When he palmed the door to Sanders' office, he had a moment's hope it wouldn't open. The door irised open into a short, dark hallway with big double doors at the end of it. The doors were covered with an angular green pattern that reminded him unpleasantly of a face. He walked toward it, feeling like he was about to be swallowed up. Music sounded barely louder than his own footfalls on the smooth floor. The rich yet spare tones reminded him of some Baroque pieces he had once heard. The whole feeling was of foreboding elegance. The doors swung inward as he approached. Chapter 29. Saunders sat at the far end of the room, behind a large round desk with the UN logo on top. Behind him glowed a piece of stained glass that had to be at least 6 meters high. The rich reds, greens, and blues would have looked more at home in a church. The pattern was symmetrical but abstract. Saunders leaned back in his chair before it, stroking his short black beard. He should have looked dwarfed by the art behind him. He didn't. Michaels and Andrews stood in front of the colonel, both as tense as if they were preparing for another brawl. Griffin hung back, not sure if he was supposed to join this or wait until they were done. Saunders had surely seen him enter, but did not look at him. He was watching Andrews, his sharp face quiet and fierce. "Sir, the procedure manuals are quite plain in this regard." Michaels made a chopping motion with his hand. "Hey, Alpha out. I'm telling you, the doc ran off. She did not become bug food." Andrews spoke with weary and half-angry patience. "Colonel, the mission data packet transmission is undeniable." Michaels interrupted. "Look, I don't know what PAC-Trans said, but I was there and I'm telling you, Dr. Marks took a walk." Saunders continued fingering his beard and did not look at either of them as he spoke. His face was difficult to read. Was he grieving, angry, or simply very abstracted? "Lieutenant Andrews, how much oxygen did Dr. Marks have remaining at the time of the ambush?" "PAC-Trans indicates her O2 supply was 87%. "How long might a person of Dr. Marks's size survive at 87% oxygen?" "Approximately 4.5 hours. Saunders looked at Andrews. "Begin an immediate search for Dr. Marks within a 12-mile radius of the crash site." Andrews shook his head in evident disbelief. "Sir, I must protest. This man is not a reliable source of information." "Private Michael's opinions," Saunders put scornful emphasis on the word, "have nothing to do with my decision. Lieutenant Dr. Marks is critical to the—" Andrews broke in. "Colonel, we have already lost a skipper to this new bug type. The odds of—" "Lieutenant!" Saunders was clearly angry now. He raised his voice very slightly and coldly overrode the UN man. "According to my calculations, Dr. Marks has only 2 hours of oxygen remaining. You will commence an immediate search, concluding only with the return of the doctor herself or her remains. Am I understood?" "I would like to protest—" "Your protests have been duly noted," Saunders snapped. "Put the base on full alert." "Yes, sir." Andrews glared at Michaels. "Thank you, sir." Saunders laid his hands flat on his desk. "Dismissed." Andrews and Michaels turned and walked toward the doors. They kept a careful distance from each other. Michaels saw Griffin, gave him a sardonic grin, and then was gone. "Private Griffin, might I speak to you for a moment?" Sanders' expression was very quiet. His careful politeness did not make Griffin feel any less uneasy. He walked forward, his shoulders tight with tension. What does he want? Yes, sir. Certainly, sir. Private Griffin. You go by Drew, don't you? Yes, sir, he said. He hid his surprise. Do you mind if I call you Drew? No, sir. Not at all, sir. Saunders smiled. He was obviously making an effort to look human. Griffin felt about as reassured as if the lead dog of a feral pack had wagged its tail. He smiled in return. Good, said Saunders and smiled. I have a cousin named Drew. He paused, and Griffin said nothing. Listen, I know that you and Michaels are friends. Yes, sir. We are very concerned about Private Michaels' mental state. We have reason to believe he may be unbalanced. Saunders sighed and looked down at his desk. Griffin wished he could read the display he was examining. Unbalanced, eh? What was your first clue? Besides, there's not a single member of Phoenix Company who isn't wonky one way or the other. For some reason, that thought echoed inside his head like the sound of a big brass gong. He pushed it aside ruthlessly to think about later. There is even some evidence to suggest he may have contributed in some way to the Skiver crash. Sir, Griffin said, keeping it as flat as possible. Saunders looked at him. I want to ask a favor of you. Sir? I want you to keep an eye on Private Michaels. If he does or says anything strange, please let me know about it. Griffin stared, his skin prickling. Yes, sir. In a pig's eye, I will. Good. If he does or says anything out of the ordinary, you'll let me know, won't you? Griffin forced himself to nod. He started to move, hoping Saunders would be prompted to dismiss him. No such luck. Private, I want to warn you. Dr. Mirren thinks the man may be schizophrenic. Schizophrenic? Marvelous. Just how stupid do you think I am? A Jensen Ultra would never miss a case of schizophrenia. The brain patterns are too distinctive. Is this a test of some sort? Griffin gazed steadily at Saunders and hoped his face showed nothing. I'm inclined to believe he's a subversive. Either way, he may prove to be very dangerous, so I ask you to please be careful. Griffin felt paralyzed and couldn't even nod. Saunders sniffed, looked down again, and then smiled tightly at him. Drew, thanks very much. I want to thank you for your assistance. We all appreciate it, and it will be reflected on your service record. Dismissed. Saunders spoke almost gently, unlike the curt ejection order he had given Andrews. Griffin forced himself into motion, fighting hard to resist the urge to run. Chapter 30. Griffin signaled his billet door closed. It was getting to be a habit. The platoon would be gathering by twos and fours right now as the word about Alonzo and Tish spread. He lay down on his bunk, shoved his hands under his head, and stared at the slowly turning fan in the ceiling. Part of him felt this must be a simulation run, where soon he would take off the top hat and they'd both be fine, just a bit chastened by being found out. He felt like his skin was being peeled slowly off of him. What was that thought he'd had staring at the colonel and behind him at the deep colors of the stained glass window? Something about the platoon, about... There isn't a single member of Phoenix Company who isn't wonky one way or the other. Yeah, that was it. Michaels is a troublemaker, and Alonzo and Alvarez not far behind. But Alonzo was dead. Hawkins, the defrocked minister. Hot Pants Hynek, barely smart enough to control his own hormones and constantly in trouble because of them. Castle, the addicted gambler. Lopez's trigger temper. Tense Whalen, wound as tight as a clock. Tish, the green fanatic, the man who knew everything all the time about the earth and her desperate wounds. And Tish was dead. And himself, of course, Andrew Griffin, emotional escape artist extraordinaire. Which wouldn't get him automatically stuck in Phoenix Company, but his age would, as would the string of uncompleted dreams and plans and jobs and schooling he trailed after himself. They had all been astonished when the posting came through, so astonished they hadn't talked about it for fear it would go away. They knew they were the dregs of the division, the platoon where Beatrice kept soldiers it couldn't wash out without breaking contract, but didn't want or didn't trust or didn't like. They had expected Rangoon, or even the shambles in Belgium, or to be sent into China when that political bomb finally exploded. They had thought they were considered expendable until this posting, this hotshot make-your-career posting. It was their salvation. They were good, they were useful, they were skillful enough to be sent here. He turned over, wrapping his arms around his stomach, and he played and replayed the image of the exploding bug. It was so strange. Living things didn't just fall into juiceless pieces. They had blood and guts. Maybe the bugs were a lot more different than even they looked. He read speculation about silicon-based life. What if they were structurally more like an evolved robot, with a resemblance to Earth's insect, a coincidence of parallel form or convergent evolution? Then he shook the speculation away. The important thing was that someone didn't want them to know any more about the bugs or this planet, and it just didn't make any sense. What else? No dreams in his increasing feeling that was connected to the flashbacks he kept having during the day. A quantum gate that its own technicians said couldn't work. Free running water, enough to waste on cleaning yourself. The EEMO forecast. The horrible joy of the sim runs, Dr. Marks vanishing and a CO who wanted him to spy on a friend, being indentured, and Sergeant Cranshaw holding a cocked pistol under Michael's chin. No, Phoenix Company was here for one reason only, and Private Andrew Griffin knew beyond doubt that was what that reason was. They were here because they were expendable. They were here because if they died, no one would care. He closed his eyes and discovered he was deeply, terribly, and helplessly angry. He wanted to roar. He wanted to break something, and he was afraid to move for fear he would go completely berserk. He lay there rigid, lost in his internal world of rage. The anger faded slowly as he breathed, deliberately forcing his muscles to relax. He told himself to stop thinking. He had no answers, and he had no power to do anything, even if he had answers. Alonzo and Tish were dead. Michaels obviously thought their deaths were unnecessary. But what if Andrews was right, and the self-destruct devices had saved them from a more agonizing death? And what about Saunders? That the man was power-hungry and manipulative could be seen from the way he moved. On the other hand, wouldn't anyone in charge of such a major UN project have to be that sort of person? He remembered the man's face as they spoke. There was something he hadn't quite understood about it. He ran through the images again, horrified. The man was frightened. He was indentured under a scared CO, power-hungry and manipulative was bad enough, but fear could impel a man to do nearly anything. As he himself knew, having run from nearly every crisis in his life to his own lasting shame. He wished he had some drugs, alcohol, Paracy, anything that would help him stop this useless thinking. He knew deep in his guts that something bad was going on here, something even worse than the obvious, and the obvious was plenty bad enough, and he could do nothing about it. Nothing at all. Militerm chimed softly, and he jumped. A message said that the mess hall had just opened for dinner. He wasn't hungry, but he felt deeply and stupidly relieved. At least he had something to do now, something that might occupy his careening mind for a few minutes. He'd get some food and then go to the enlisted lounge. The wake for Alonzo and Tish would probably be there tonight. Surely someone would come up with some alcohol. He could get blasted and run away and forget all this impossible confusion. Chapter 31. The mess hall was deserted. The rows of empty tables in the spare, cold room made him feel like he was the last living person left on the planet. Where was the rest of the platoon? He forced himself forward. They were probably doing more sim runs and would show up soon. Dinner was horrible as usual. Examining it provided some distraction. The mess hall AP called it meatloaf. 3 gray squares lay unappealingly on his plate. Next to them was a green paste that had been billed as broccoli. Griffin stared at it for a moment, then realized that the veggie machine had been programmed for structure. What did Cookie do with his time? He sat down and cut off a chunk of the meatloaf with a fork. It was so dry he immediately took a drink of water. The only taste it had was in the top layer, which crunched and was very salty. Did the veggie machine think he was deficient in sodium? Dr. Mirren came in while he was carefully chewing the tough food. She seemed subdued. He nodded to her, and she set her tray down across from his. "Hey," he said. "How's Alvarez?" "Couple of broken ribs." She picked up her cup. "They shipped him Earthside. They'll patch him up there." Griffin just looked at her. The sick bay was more than adequate for dealing with something simple like a couple of broken ribs. Mirren saw his expression. "Don't sweat it," she said, and shook her head, shaking away the topic at the same time. "I hate doing autopsies," she continued. Griffin accepted the change in topic. If the military wanted to waste their money shipping busted-up privates around, that was their own business. Autopsies, huh? That's a great way to start a dinner table conversation. Knock it off. You wouldn't have lasted one term at UT if you'd been squeamish. Well, autopsies beat worrying about whether you're going to cut off the wrong thing and kill a person. Her grin was a shadow of her usual. Yeah, I suppose so. She cut off a forkful of meatloaf and put it into her mouth. She didn't even grimace, just chewed carefully. She'd been here longer. Maybe it was possible to get used to this food, but there's no longer any hope of making things right, you know? Yeah, I know. They just lie there and it's all gone. Only the meat left behind. Do you believe there's anything else? Something besides the meat? Griffin felt wary. Mostly I don't. Maybe in a sense, 'cause our substance gets recycled into new life. If there is new life, there might not be. You're referring to those EEMO projections? Yes. Even if this project doesn't work and life dies, there will be something left, won't there? Bacteria or whatever. Give it a little time and things will redevelop. Murren nodded. Very likely. Not a sure thing, but it didn't take Gaia very long to make life the first time, and conditions won't be all that much different. Probably won't follow the same path, though. Which might not be such a bad thing. Too true, she said, and ate some more of her meatloaf. Mind if I ask you a question? She swallowed. Ask away. I can wrap my mind around the idea that we might be close to killing off all human life on Earth. It's pretty obvious, isn't it? I can even see how we could take it so far that we might kill off most mammals. But virtually all multicellular life, plants included? Dr. Murren opened her mouth, then closed it. She took another bite of her meatloaf. Griffin's alarm mounted over what she might say the longer she delayed, and he wished he hadn't asked the question. She put down her fork and looked him in the eyes. For the first time since he'd met her, there was no thought in his mind of her fine body. It's a question of balances, she said. I haven't seen all the data, and I'm not qualified to evaluate it anyways. However, it's more than just poisons in the soil and the air. There's a viral mutation that keeps cropping up over and over, one that attacks mitochondria, and even minimally healthy immune system can fight it off. It's probably endemic in many areas. However, as we degrade the health en masse of vast numbers of organisms, this virus spreads. The core virus tends to kill off only those animals and plants that are already pretty much dead. The coup de grace, you might say. But the mutation can gain a foothold in healthy organisms. You remember that nuke along the Ivory Coast 2 years ago? Well, sure, who doesn't? The terrorists got careless, and I doubt it. There was a very fast wave of death rolling across that country, taking out everything in its path. Reports stopped coming out after 2 days, and 4 days after that, some terrorists had a nuclear accident. Griffin felt his face pale. Dr. Mirren nodded. You see, don't you? What are the odds? And wouldn't you do the same if you had your finger on the button? But they stopped it from spreading, didn't they? Yes, they did. That time. However, the mutation involved is just a chain duplication. It's probably happened 1,000 times a decade for millions of years, but never found the right situation waiting for it before. The declining oxygen levels are perfect for it. It's just a matter of time. Griffin ate in silence for a minute. So it takes out everything with mitochondria, essentially the entire Earth, and leaves the world with nothing but slime. You got it. I hope not. Dr. Miran laughed a little too much at his joke. Griffin couldn't laugh at all. As he watched her hair shake in the artificial light, he thought about Phoenix Company again, and about the fact that it's okay to tell secrets to a dying man. Because who is he going to tell?